Welcome back to X on Air. It's great to be with you now for our last block of the intermission show. And my two guests, you know them already. You have seen them on the stage. Thank you, Kacey. Thank you, Abdi. Thank you for stopping by.
Thank you. Thank you for inviting us.
Yeah, how does it feel now? You have done your talk. It's been a while.
I'm totally relaxed and I feel like I'm having a vacation in Vienna. How about you?
It feels great. I'm so relaxed. I was able to eat something finally.
Good for you.
Was it your first TED Talk? Or?
It is. I have watched many TED Talk on YouTube, but this is my first time.
Yeah, it was my first presentation. I've been to TED Talks before, watching people do it, but being up on that stage was like an incredible experience. Yeah, I loved it.
Yeah, definitely.
It's actually more difficult than the way it seems.
I'm sure. I cannot imagine in front of those 1,200, 1,500 people. It's like a river of people that just keeps going and it gets up and it gets lost. Eh? No, thank you very much for stopping by. It's really nice to have you both together because you sort of focus on the power of human in complicated situations.
Yes.
And you try to capture those happy moments in between all the darkness and all the hardships going on. So why art? Why you chose art to make an impact?
Well, first of all, I'm an artist, so it's very natural for me to use art as my tool to communicate. But I think art itself is a tool, a very powerful tool. It communicates emotion as well as like a security blanket. It covers things a bit. Mm-hmm. For example, we are dealing with political situations, but if we communicate directly about politics, sometimes people get offended easily because maybe they haven't read as much. But if you use art to communicate about politics, then people kind of think, oh, I know art. I studied art before, like from elementary school. So they're more willing to open, or they're more willing to look, and so therefore it can bring forward the issue much better than using political language, maybe. What do you think?
Well, I'm a journalist, so I do a lot of my work is around writing, right?
Yeah.
And documenting events and experiencing, how people are transforming their own communities or their lives. And very often what I've seen is that people might read the stories and appreciate what's happening, but the visual aspect of art is so important. It's so valid. It brings so many people a lot more closer. And even in thinking about my own TED Talk, I was like, so how do you tell this story of transformation, this story of happiness, creating spaces of joy, which is actively happening in so many countries that I cover, which have either are still under war or have just are in this process of transitioning. And putting together these photos and even presenting them to my own siblings and my mother and be like, can you look at these photos and tell me what they tell you? And the emotions they evoke is completely different than if I had sat down there and just be like, so tell me, what did you experience? What was the experience like? So I think the visual aspect of it is very important, and which moves people, it brings a lot more people closer, and it even makes a lot of people reevaluate their own thinking. Yeah.
Especially if you use art, then you leave it also for interpretation.
Yes.
And then they will find something to connect within it, rather than just telling them what they should feel, what they should do, right?
I think art is loaded. For example, a picture or a painting, right? It's not really as precise as word. Actually, words is not that precise. We just think it's precise.
Yeah.
But a picture sometimes are dealing with multiple meanings all at the same time. So depending on the person's background, they can reinterpret it on their own with their knowledge, their background knowledge. So I think in that sense, it's a much more open system or well-covered system than just using a language. And also, I think how long can a song last, right? You yell a political slogan in the protest, maybe I try. After 4 hours, I lose my voice.
Yeah.
But if you have a picture or a flag, or an artwork like a sculpture, it can last forever.
You know, people will share, will spread around the world. They will not spread you chanting something.
Especially in the days, in the years of social media, it's like we are on right now.
Yeah. How about this element of happiness among sadness? Because definitely these are complex situations in which you're writing, and then you're trying to provide a different perspective to it, a more happy perspective to the whole complex situation. Why that element of happiness? What is it that strikes you?
I think what strikes me the most is joy, this question of joy and how it compares to happiness. So a lot more people would be dealing with or would be thinking about the overall effect of like how happy are we, right? But when you're in the midst of war, you can't be thinking about full-time happiness. It's like, what can I get out of today? Like, what are these moments of joy, right, that I can put together that could then, lead to this overall effect of this is sort of like, I don't know, like you wake up in the morning and this has happened for me, right? And then this has happened for me in the afternoon, and I was able to like pick these specific moments and like putting them together to create this overall effect of happiness. Because when you have like, as we're just talking about, like either you're protesting on a daily minute basis, or you have the gun facing you, or you go out of your house, and even in like a good situation, but there could be like a terrorist attack or like a bomb attack, and then you're harmed, and like you're not thinking about, oh, this is how good I feel. Like you start appreciating the small things, and that's what I'm attracted to. The little small things. When people talk about like you can now have a good cheesecake in Mogadishu, that attracts me. That I'm like, oh, interesting. So where is this coming from, right?
Okay.
Or people would be like, I want to work with child soldiers in Mogadishu. It's like some of the people like whose stories I've written about, and I'm like, so how are you working with them? They're like, oh, I take them through 2-hour yoga classes, and then I make them sit down and tell me about their life experiences. And by that time, they're so exhausted, they're willing to share anything.
Right.
But 2 hours before that,
torture them.
Yeah, 2 hours before that, they're just like, so tell me about your child soldier experience. They're just like quiet.
Yeah.
Right? Or another, the Somali Canadian whose father was actually like a peace activist in Mogadishu. One of the things she does is that she introduced surfing to like all these young traumatized kids, and so they know how to swim, but then she takes them surfing, and then like right in the middle of the ocean, like they just like stop, like sit on the boards, and she's like, okay, let's all talk, like in the middle of the ocean. And it's like, it's a good way to get people going, right? Like, and they all come out, and I was like, so how do you guys feel? And they're all just like, oh my God, it was incredible. I was like, well, your experiences were very traumatic, but at least if you're getting joy out of that.
Yeah.
And they call her every other Friday, they're just like, let's do it again. So that's what I'm interested in as a journalist,
Those little golden nuggets, that are happening in between all these ashes, and then you find a flower that is blooming. You want to know how that flower happened, right?
I think for me I wouldn't use the word happiness. I would use the word humor.
Okay.
Like humor of all kind, like dark humor. As you know, you're actually interviewing a gangster boss. Look at my appearance, right? Old school gangster boss. So that's dark humor. The ability to laugh at things, or at least have some fun.
Yeah.
So I think that's very human of us. Like even the army would have entertainment group to send like people like Bob Hope, right, to the front line of Vietnam to tell jokes to the soldiers. I think this is very important. We cannot be tense 24 hours a day, even in a desperate situation. Like there's a lot of suffering and pain. Like humor reminds us that we're human, and we're able to laugh. Maybe not at the enemy, but maybe at ourselves. Or when you see something like that, then it relaxes you. So to give you more energy to put up a good fight. So that's what I think humor can be a weapon.
It's like a coping mechanism as well.
That's
so
right.
Under so much stress, you need to somehow find a way to let things go or disconnect.
And I think the people of Hong Kong as you probably have seen a lot of those Hong Kong funny movie from the 1980s.
Yeah.
Is exported to all over the world. And I think the
Jackie Chan.
Everybody hates Jackie Chan now in Hong Kong. But in Hong Kong, most of us are already kind of brought up in this kind of funny, humorous way of looking at the world. It's in our nature, our culture too. So that when this kind of a political polarization happens, a lot of people just like make funny posters and actually one time I watched in YouTube, I stumbled upon a CIA YouTube, right?
Okay.
And in the video it said, well, if you don't have a charismatic leader, it doesn't matter, because if you have, the regime will whack him and he's gone and you don't have any more leader. So maybe what you can do is like make fun of the regime and they care, because even though they are a great dictator, but they don't like people making fun of them. So maybe humor is the way to go.
Yeah.
From the CIA.
But that's funny that you talk about these different examples, because then I would ask you, how about, did you have stories of particular people beyond yourself? So then a story that comes to your mind of somebody using this humor beyond you, and also sort of rallying the people and creating escape for them.
It's a temporary escape. It's not like a full escape, right? Because people are angry, they go to the protest. But when they see that something funny, like for example, recently I created a mobile jail, and me and my friend dressed up like mean-looking mainland Chinese police. And at first, the protesters saw us and they thought, "Wow, he looks so real." I got my costume from the Halloween shop, and then they discover we are fake. You know what they did? They willingly asked us to arrest them as a gesture of defiance. I have a fake whip, all right? And they asked me, "Please whip me." So I pretend I'm gonna like hit them, and they're like, "I'm not going to China. I'm not going to China." So this is a nice way to interact and also to somehow let them see the situation. So that's the power of art, right? It won't, of course, solve political problems, but it will bring forward the problem. It's like gravity.
Satire.
The evil of society is always there, but you might not realize it. And art let it out. So it's kind of like Newton's apple. The apple is the sculpture, and the evil is that gravity. And now everybody see it, and they can start discussing and have a debate.
Yeah. Did you find also that as well in Mogadishu?
Yes, I do. Two experiences come to mind, which is one is a few years ago on New Year's Eve, I spent time with a group of artists in Mogadishu. These were like, they used to be big artists in like the 70s and the 80s. So the war started in the 90s, and for pretty much like over 2 decades, they haven't done anything. So no resources, no nothing. And all of a sudden, they had gotten this grant to actually start doing artwork in Mogadishu, because all of a sudden, there were companies and foundations were willing to put in money into this. And I spent like 2 days with them, including New Year's Eve, where they were actually doing all these. They were pretty much sitting down to document what had happened in the past 20 years before that. And it was a historical sort of like archive, it was a social archive, and they were all like just painting and working on it side by side and like talking through some of these events. So they would talk through it, like they're smoking, they're drinking coffee, it's late at night, the year's turning, and they would cry and they would laugh and they would smile, and like they would share their stories and like, the things that they lost in the war and the things that they gained. And I felt, I was sitting there like, as a journalist, being very objective, asking the tough questions. But at some point, like, it gets to you. You're just like, these are humans who are just like, me, and are going through these experiences. And I found that, they kept saying this. They kept saying that art was the thing that was healing them. That now that they had the brush and the color and the paint again, they were able to like live and become more productive and more alive. One of the experience that I've come through in my journalism is there's this incredible young man in Mogadishu who returned back into the country in 2011, right around, when the Civil War was sort of like succeeding. And he looked around, wanted to get into business, looked around, and he was like, so that the politicians, including the president at the time, was sending their suits back to Nairobi and Dubai, so that they could get cleaned in the laundry.
Okay.
So he's like, why don't you start a laundry shop? So he starts a laundry shop, and all of a sudden he's very popular. He gets covered by the BBC. Everybody's writing about him. Then a few
influencers about them.
Exactly. It's like, okay, this Washington City just got its first laundry store. Then stays a few more months, looks around, realizes that at government offices and all these non-governmental organization offices, they had these fake plastic flowers like on the tables, and he's like, well, you can plant flowers here. It can be a business. So starts a flower business, and all of a sudden, Valentine's Day is a huge deal in Mogadishu, right? Like everybody is like giving each other roses, and and again he gets covered, and it's like, oh, so Mogadishu has its first florist. So I look at people like that, serial entrepreneurs whose businesses are not just like about let's make money, but also like how can I inject happiness and joy and at the same time also make money in these cities that are just completely ravaged by war. Yeah.
Nice. Well, to wrap it up, I would like to ask you about, so this last block of the intermission show, it's all about looking into the present. And the talks that we'll have to do with very relevant topics going on right now and about actually taking action. So in your mind, how do you think that one person can make an impact or a change given the perspective that you have about those issues?
I think often in any resistance, we will feel lonely and we'll feel like you are the only one who have awakened and you want to join the resistance, but you can find them, right? Because everybody are waiting for the first guy to show up, right? And nobody want to be the first guy.
Yeah.
But to your surprise, often sometimes you'll become the first guy, accidentally maybe, or your contribution might seem small at the time, but it turns out to be a great contribution. I actually experienced a few of that. I remember one time 5 years ago during the umbrella movement, the protesters secretly built a temple of the martial god, who happens to be worshipped by the gangster and the police.
Okay.
And they also built a Christian kind of Jesus Christ temple, no, church, sorry. A little photograph of it. So, and then one of the protesters got the tip, as they saw the police are coming, they're going to destroy the temple. And then he posted on the wall, on the Facebook, and then suddenly like 100 people show up to protect the temple of Guan Gong, which is this martial god. Mm-hmm. So I think, is it useful? Of course. Maybe just one post, a little poster here, or just speaking about it can help. You don't have to be like a superhero and to be like fighting at the front line. Nowadays, everybody can help. Yeah.
So in a way, if there's something that you care about, just speak your mind.
So don't underestimate the contribution of the individual. That's the message here.
Mm-hmm.
I think my thinking is that as a journalist and a writer, like one of the things that I actively do is like seek out stories of hope. Like, and that's not necessarily to say like you overlook all the challenges that is around, but you also look for the silver linings, because it can be easy to say, well, this is a dangerous zone and there's nothing that is happening there. A good example for me is like last year I worked on a story about the e-commerce businesses that are springing up all over Somalia. Somalia was one of the last countries in Africa or actually one of the last countries in the world to go online. And internet connectivity is like less than 2%. But
to this day?
To this day. But the good thing is that a lot more people have access to mobile phones and mobile money. So what's happening is that there are all these businesses that have come up where you can buy things online pay them with your phone, and then they will get delivered. So the internet might not be like pervasive like to everybody, but there's connectivity, and there's like mobile phones, and there's phone calls, and people can do this business. And businesses are springing up all across the country, championed by young people who are not sitting around saying, well, what is the government doing to create employment for me? Well, this is a war-torn country, barely has any government. So the young people are actually out there putting a lot of the hard work. And I did that story, and I remember like so much response came in where everybody was just like, I would never think that there's an e-commerce business in Mogadishu. Like everybody just thinks that, you cover when there's a bomb attack or a terrorist attack.
Exactly.
So picking out those stories, I think, are very vital. And sometimes it can be challenging because, editors and readers or like your own instinct can be telling you, it's not worth it. Maybe there's not a story there. So going the extra mile is really helpful sometimes.
Well, that's really, I think that's something very important, because once you create a stereotype about a particular place, it's really hard to change that. Like, I met many people here from Bosnia and Herzegovina who are still amazed how some people still ask them if there is still a war going on.
Yes.
And it's just because you create a stereotype, and it's really hard to change that. Yeah. So people, I can understand, or I've seen that happen with other places. I can imagine that if all you hear is bad, you get surprised by the good news.
Yeah, you get surprised,
Guys, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you very much for your time. It has been a great day. I hope you continue to enjoy your time here in Vienna. And for you watching us right now, actually this morning, we had very long lines because so many people came today to TEDxVienna that we actually had to make a little video to show it for you. This is actually how TEDxVienna started today. Check it out.